Hi everyone. Today I would like to talk about the second part of defining research question, which is quantitative research question. And this part is more difficult than qualitative research question not because it has a lot of numbers, but also it is very hard to define or differentiate between independent variable and a dependent variable, and there are a lot of things to consider. And I'm personally more involved in quantitative research, so I know a lot of these tricks. So before we give you the definition of those variables, I would like to show you an example of quantitative research question. So here is an example. Are Arkansas Nuclear One flyers helpful for improving public evacuation preparedness in Russellville, Arkansas? So Arkansas Nuclear One flyers, I think most of you know that if you move into a new house or if you come to this area from somewhere else, you will receive those flyers in your mailbox, or you can find it in a post office or a bank. And if you want to look at if those flyers are helpful or efficient for improving public evacuation preparedness in this area, so there are two variables. One will be the flyer. The other variable will be the knowledge or preparedness of local residents. If you are looking at the dependency or relationship between those two variables, or one variable will be influential on the other, that's a quantitative research question. So the definition of quantitative research inquires about the relationship among variables that the investigator seeks to know. So here are two very important concepts in quantitative research: dependent variables and independent variables. Dependent variables are those considered output or effect or why of a research question. Independent variables, on the other hand, are input or causes or X. So if you look at this graphic, we have two groups of plants or trees, and with the input of sunshine or water, the trees grow. So the growth of tree will be the outcome. That will be Y and the dependent variables. And the independent variable will be the causes, either sunshine or water or fertilizer. So this is a typical model of quantitative research. Y equals 2x plus 5. And obviously this is a math question. However, in this question, we will see two variables, y and x. And the change of y is solely dependent on x. Because y is dependent on x, y is considered the effect or dependent variable. X, on the other hand, will consider the cause or independent variable. So here I would like to show you an example differentiating between the dependent variable and independent variable. How does critical thinking ability relate to student achievement? In this context, the student achievement is dependent on critical thinking, or in other way, we could say critical thinking play a role in changing the student achievement. Because the critical thinking is the cause and student achievement is the effect, we consider critical thinking is independent variable while student achievement is dependent variable. Another important concept is called controlled variable. So when you are doing an experiment, you want to control your environment to maintain the same speed, the same temperature, the same elevation. Those are called controlled variables. And the same can apply to a social science study. When you are comparing different groups, you want to keep the same age groups, the same gender, the same religious belief, the same education background. Those are controlled variables for your case study. So controlled variables should always be the same in different groups. Let's look at the example here. If we use the same case, we look at how critical thinking changed the student achievement. And you want to control the education background of the parents of those students. So the education attainment of the parents are considered controlled variables. So here we have three different definitions. Independent variables are things you make a change. Dependent variables are the things you observed, the variables you observe, and the controlled variable are the variables you maintain the same within your independent variable. So in a research question, you should not only consider the number of variables to be defined, but also how to measure those variables. So in the actual implementation of the study, you will not have a huge challenge or difficulty. So here, if we look at the same question between the critical thinking skill and the student achievement, you would say, how can we quantify critical thinking? One way to quantify is you distribute the surveys among students, and then you ask them to rate their critical thinking skill on a scale of 1 to 10, and the survey score can be considered estimate of their critical thinking skill. And the student achievement can be quantified by, their salary or their GPA or their, awards received from their career. So here is a practice for the four variables we just defined. What is the relationship amongst career prospects, salary and benefits, and the physical working conditions and job satisfaction among firefighters? And so to look at this question, you should first identify what are the dependent variables and what are the independent variables. And obviously, the dependent variable will be the effect or outcome. I would say the job satisfaction is a dependent variable, and while the independent variable would be career prospect, salary and benefits, and physical working conditions. And what could be the controlled variable? You want to maintain the same among your study subject. So I would say maybe you control their experience, the experience of firefighters, the age of firefighters, or the leadership style of firefighters. Those are considered controlled variables. So question 3, how dependent and independent variables could be quantified? So the dependent variable, job satisfaction, can be quantified by a score from the interview on a scale of 1 to 10 among the firefighters, and the independent variable, career prospect, salary and benefit, physical working conditions, those can be quantified by some actual numbers, such as the annual income, or if they have air conditioner, or if they have an individual office, things like that. Next, we will take a look at how to ask a quantitative research question. And normally there are two different ways to ask a quantitative research question. One is called a descriptive question, another is called an inferential question. A descriptive question is a question with only one variable or one type of variables. I say one type because there are either independent variable or dependent variable, and sometimes there are several dependent variables or several independent variables in a descriptive question. However, we only include one type of them. The inferential questions, on the other hand, describe the causal relationship, associations, trends, or interactions among two or more variables. I would say two types of variables. They build the relationship between the dependent variables and the independent variables. So here I would like to give you some examples of descriptive questions. Question 1 would be, how many calories do Americans consume per day? And if you look at this question, there is only one variable, calories. And the variable is an outcome, so it's I would say it's a dependent variable. It can be dependent on several things like food access or obesity rate or their physical education or health education. And the group is a study subject. You are looking at Americans, although which type of Americans or which group of American is not specified here. So it refers to the general public. Question 2 is how many calories do American men and women consume per day? And there's only one variable, calories, or daily calorific intake. And although we have two groups, Group 1 is American men and Group 2 is American women. You are comparing the consumption between the groups. However, because there is only one variable or only one outcome, you consider this descriptive question. The third example of descriptive question is pretty complex. What proportion of British male and female university students use the top 5 social networks such as Facebook, MySpace, etc.? So there is only one outcome, use of top 5 social networks, and there is no cause. The cause might be their education background, their familiarity with computers. Because there's only one dependent variable, we consider this descriptive too. And however, in this research, we have two groups. One is male British university student, and the other is our counterpart female group student. The second category of a quantitative research question is called the inferential question. The inferential question explores the relationships between two factors. So for example, what is the relationship between study time and exam scores amongst university students? In this question, you are studying if there is a causal relation between the study time and the exam score. If those study more would get a high score in exam, and your study subject or your group is university students. And because we have two variables here, the outcome, the effects would be exam scores. The input, the cause would be study time, which is an independent variable. And so we consider this inferential question. And the group would be all university students without specifying either they are female or male or freshman or sophomore. So this is another inferential question. What is the relationship between gender and attitude toward music privacy amongst adolescents? When you look at this question, you should first identify if there are dependent variable and independent variable, if there are cause or outcome in this question. And specifically here you will say gender might be the cause and attitude towards music privacy will be the outcome. So because it examines two factors, we consider this inferential question, and your study group would be adolescent without specifying which country or which study area. So after looking at those two research questions, those two inferential questions, we have a general model for defining an inferential question. And in my understanding, we should always define a quantitative research question in an inferential manner because it's more professional. It gives people more space and more room to explore. In this model, I just proposed this model by myself. So what is the relationship between A and B? That would be model 1 and model 2. What does A relate to B? And model 3, how does A influence B? And you, in addition to those three models, you add something else to the sentence. So what you will add will be the group amongst certain groups or between female and males. And then you add a controlled variables. For example, you controlling for gender, controlling for religions, controlling for races, or controlling for something else. So I will give you an example here. What is the relationship between academic performance and SAT scores amongst ATU students controlling for their family incomes? So here, independent variable would be SAT scores, and this might be the cause, and the academic performance would be the outcome, which is a dependent variable, and this is solely dependent on how you see the problem yourself, and your study subject will be groups, the group among ATU students, and you are controlling for their family incomes. So all these students will have a family income ranging from maybe 10,000 to 20,000. So you are studying a specific group of students. So here is your practice. Please use this model to propose an inferential question about earthquake preparedness strategies. If you look at the keyword here, the strategies may include prepare enough water and food before an earthquake, or you receive certain education or knowledge about earthquake, like the location of shelters or where to go from your home to the shelter in earthquakes. And first, you should identify the dependent variable, independent variable, and the controlled variables and the group. One question would be, how would the amount of food and water influence the risk faced in an actual earthquake for a group such as low-income people controlling for their race. So that would be one question that I just improvised. So please take about 2 to 3 minutes to think about a same or similar research question, and this will be part of your quiz on Blackboard. One last concept in this lecture is called hypothesis. Hypotheses are expected outcome of research, and not every research has a hypothesis. I personally think hypothesis only exists in referential research question, inferential research question, when you are comparing groups. In descriptive research question, most of the time there's no hypothesis. For example, a question would be, what is the population in the US in the next 20 years? You may not say, my hypothesis is there will be 400 million people. I mean, we don't do hypotheses like that. We only do hypotheses when there are two groups, such as female and male. We would say male will have a better academic performance than female students. And those are your guess, and the guess will become your hypothesis. And normally there are 3 types of hypothesis called non-hypothesis, directional hypothesis, and non-directional hypothesis. A non-hypothesis indicates no relationship or no significant difference between groups. It is always indicated by capital letter H followed by 0, so H0. It is a format used in math and statistics. And here I give you 2 examples. Tomato plants show no difference in growth rates when planted in compost rather than soil. Because there's no difference in those 2 environments, we consider it a non-hypothesis. And also another example here, there is no relationship between student achievement and academic performance, and you expect that there are no relationships between the 2. We consider it a non-hypothesis. The second hypothesis is called directional hypothesis. It indicates an expected prediction as well as the exact relationship, whether this relationship is positive or negative. And normally we use H1 to indicate a directional hypothesis, and actually the non-directional one is also H1. And sometimes in other textbooks they use HA to indicate the two hypotheses because they are considered alternative hypotheses. And here I have two examples. Publicly traded firms will have higher growth rates than privately held firms. If you see the words higher, less, more, so you have the comparison. If you are comparing two groups and you have the actual outcome that one group is higher or lower or more or less than the other group, you consider this a directional hypothesis. The same applies to the second example. Stress and health are inversely related, so inversely indicate a direction, such that health decreases as stress increases. Non-directional hypothesis, in the other hand, is an expected prediction but without the exact relationship. So you cannot say one is more than the other or poorer than the other or greater than the other. So I have three examples here. Publicly traded firm will have different growth rates than privately held firms. However, you will not tell your reader if this difference is more or less. Second example, stress and health are related, but I didn't say if it's positively or negatively related. The third example, there is a significant difference in academic performance between males and females, and I didn't say which one is better, either males or females. If you do not see the direction or the level in your hypothesis, we consider this non-directional hypothesis. And thank you everyone for listening to this lecture. And this lecture is from chapter 7 of the textbook. And I can tell you the quiz is pretty difficult this time, so be prepared. Read the textbook before you take the quiz. And the quiz only has 120 minutes, 2 hours to finish. So make sure you are prepared. And if you have any questions, please email me. Thank you.